Hello. So if you follow my Instagram, you might have seen this faux rock that I made. I've had a few requests to show you how it's done, so I thought I'd make a little video. I'm going to show you a variation on this to make forest stones. So this is more kind of like cliff face, a miniaturized scale, and what we're making today is more of a 1-to-1 scale. It is using as many natural materials as possible. It's non-toxic, totally safe for amphibians and reptiles and that sort of thing. And it doesn't use paint, so it's a little bit different. We're using this dense styrene foam, which is really great for carving lots of small details, and it doesn't damage easily, which is great. So I'm going to glue a couple of pieces of this together for some height, so that I can shape it into a stone. So let's start. So I'm going to show you roughly a helpful technique for when you're carving this. So if you go in at an angle, and rather than cutting all the way through, you can twist until a section comes off, and that is going to give you a more textured surface than if you cut straight through. And you just kind of want to go all the way around till you've got your shape. If you're doing a more textured rock, it's quite good to cut deeper into it to create more caverns and texture and stuff like that. But because we're going for like a big forest stone, I'm not going to go as deeply as that. So once you've got your rough shape carved, you're going to want to smooth out all the roughness and edges, because we're going for a forest stone that's, you know, been rained on day after day, and it's going to be a lot smoother than, say, a cliff face like the other one that I showed you. I'm just using 120 grit sandpaper, and you just want to go over the whole thing until it starts to have a more worn appearance. So the fake rock has been fully sanded down now to give it a smooth, worn appearance. I've also used a textured rock to press texture into it, which just gives you a bit more detail, stops it looking overly smooth. So I will be back in a second when we'll be covering it. So the technique that we're using to cover the rock is aquarium safe black silicone, and we're covering it in powders effectively. You can do this in a pestle and mortar. I used a spice grinder, which I'd recommend. You can get them really cheap, and it just saves you so much time. So this is like an expanded clay that I've ground to a powder, activated charcoal, and pumice. I've also got, because I was looking for something that could give me a green tint, and most green tints are at least somewhat toxic, and it was doing my head in. And then I found that you could use spirulina powder for dyeing clothes, and I thought, well, if you can do that, it'll work for this. So possibly not necessary. You could probably get away with just the pumice and the activated charcoal for just a generic rock colour. I'm trying to match it to a pre-existing rock, so that's why I've got a variety of different colours. So we're kind of trying to emulate the colour of this, because I do have real rocks in my vivarium, and I want them to kind of blend together. So first thing to do is to glove up, because Black silicone is a nightmare to get off your hands. And to get off everything, actually. Which is why I'm using this tray. And also why this is such a mess. Because I use this a lot and it looks horrible. Anyway. So, first thing we're going to do is mix a base colour. Right, so put this here to keep me right. Now, you want your first colour to be the darkest colour, because that's going to be what sits in all the indentation and crevices. Your first coat will be slightly darker because of the silicone, so you don't have to go too dark. So actually I'll start with the pumice. Now, depending on the type of rock that you're going for, the texture of your powder can be different. So if you're going for like sandstone desert sort of effect, then you don't need to grind it as finely as I have here, but because we're going for a worn forest stone, I've ground it to a fine powder so that it's smooth and it gets all the texture, hopefully, that we've put into this rock. A little bit more. Right, so I've cleaned off my tray because you don't want any blue bits of dust getting into your finish. Now you can use a paintbrush for this, but you're not getting that paintbrush back. So I've actually found the easiest way is to use a gloved hand. Now what you're going to want to do is not put the silicone directly on top of it and then smear it out, because you're never going to get the right finish that way. I just like to press it in. I'm sure the camera's going to shake about, it's going to look horrible, but no matter. Now the thing here is you don't want the layer too thick, because we've spent time putting detail into this and we don't want to ruin it. Obviously this is silicone, so make sure you're doing it in a well ventilated area, because it is not nice stuff. Right, I'm going to do half of this first to show you. Now, even though silicone is very thick, you can see you can get quite a thin layer on it just by patting. Right, now you want to cover with the dust material that we've got. Do one colour at a time on one tray so that you're not mixing them up. And it's fine to go heavy-handed because we can pour it back in using clean hand. It's really important that you press this in. Aside from adhesion, we're also going to make sure that we're not getting any textures from the silicone itself. So obviously when you pull your hand away, you can make little peaks, and you don't want that. Right, that looks good. I'm going to finish this and we're going to come back with the next step. So you can see it's completely covered now. There's no silicone showing. Now, aquarium silicone cures in about 24 hours. You probably won't need to wait that long to do the next step. Just give it a few hours to make sure that when you do your next coat, you're not lifting up the previous ones. So we're going to come back in a few hours and continue. So this is the rock as it is now. After the first coat has dried, I waited a couple of hours and then rinsed it, because that's when you notice if you've missed any spots, which I had, so I went back and repeated the process. So this is what we have now, which to be honest you could just use like that, but I want to go a little bit further, so I'm going to mix up some warmer tones to give a bit of contrast, so we'll do that. Right, so I've got my other colour mixed up, and this time very lightly, just in certain areas, small amount, just add some texture over the top. I'm going by my reference stone that I've got, and the warmer stuff tends to be more on the top and then fades out, so that's what I'm going to do. Trying to get just a random pattern. Right, we're going to leave that a couple of hours and then rinse it off and see how we're looking. So the last step that I'm going to do is using some of this Spirulina powder. I'm going to pack some silicone into the crevices where algae might grow, and put a little bit of that in, see how it looks. So I'll come back when I've done that. So this is the finished stone. As you can see, there's a lot of subtle colour variation within it, and all the texture that we pressed into it with the real stone has remained because we used nice thin layers. It's the most realistic effect that I've seen. I'm sure you'll correct me if you don't agree, but there's one last thing that I want to show you about this. This is the coolest thing about this, I think, is that it can get wet like a real stone. It will hold on to just a little bit of surface moisture and darken in colour. So if you pair this with real rocks, which is what I'm going to do, it will react in the same way as the other rocks in your vivarium. So things will be able to grow on it, algae, mosses, that sort of thing, which I believe is relatively unique. I don't think I've seen anything like that before. One thing to note is it might, if you do this and then you leave it for a few days and you come back, it will look hydrophobic. Water will bounce right off of it and you'll think, oh no, it's not worked. because I did. I thought it's a failed experiment, I'm just going to have to deal with it. However, if you resubmerge it, keep it under a shower or something like that, eventually this property kind of goes away. I don't know if it's to do with the very fine texture that sort of initially repels the water, but if this is kept in a vivarium and it's misted daily, it won't develop that property again. It will continue to sort of go wet, dry, wet, dry. So yeah, let me know what you think. If you've got any questions or comments, let me know.